So this is 9.5b, and we're done with the lecture. We're just looking at the problem set here, just to kind of give you some tips as far as to do well on this. 1 through 16 should not be any problem at all. Let's look at number 15. We have the square root of negative 48, which, remember, when you have a square root with a negative in it, you pull the negative out as an I, and you're left with 48. And this is going to be I square root of two numbers multiplied together that give us 48, where I can take the square root of one of those, and the other one hopefully cannot be simplified. It makes life easier. Square root of 16 is 4, and the 3 stays in there since you can't do anything with it. And that's it for what you're doing for that part of the lesson. When you get down to 17 through 42, a little bit more complicated, and it says you use whatever method seems to fit the situation. So you can either use factoring into two binomials. Don't plan on that working very often. Completing the square, which with these kind of problems you are going to run into a mess with square roots. Or you can use the quadratic formula, which I really suggest doing for these, not only for the practice, but that's how I did the examples, and it's just going to be the easiest for you to do these with. 17 through 24 should not be too terribly difficult for you, but then you start looking at some of the other ones with fractions, and you're like, oh, I hate fractions, I'm going to die. All right, let's look at 26 just for a minute. Okay, and that's being squared equals negative 1/2. All right, that means you just take the square root of both sides. That gets rid of our exponent there, and it gives us plus or minus the square root of negative 1/2 here. Okay, so that's a good start. So the first thing we're going to do, again, is we're always going to look at the radical first. See if there's anything we can do with it to simplify that. And there is, because we have this can be written as, before I get ahead of myself, there's a negative right there. So I split these up, and I see I have a radical there on the bottom. So I get x minus 1/4 equals plus or minus, the negative comes out as an I, and we have to get rid of that radical right there. So we multiply top and bottom by the square root of 2. And that gives me x minus 1/4 plus or minus, this times this is the square root of 2. This times this equals the square root of 2 squared, which is equal to 2. So that 2 then goes right there. All right, I'm going to move stuff up. Get stuff out of the way. So this is where we are right now. There's our answer so far. Oops, there's an equal sign there. We're going to move our 1/4 over by adding it to both sides. And what do we have? X equals 1/4 plus or minus I square root of 2 over 2. Now, let's look at that. Are we happy with this? Can I simplify anything? Let's see. Nope, really can't do anything with this. So we are good to go right there. All right. So that is an example of ones like 17 to 28, or I guess 25 to 28, what you do with the fraction. When you get up into ones like 34, notice there's the whole thing is, well, I know it's not the correct term, but I call it fractionated. Don't tell your other math teachers, don't use that phrase, because there's no such thing, but it works for me. 1/5 x squared plus 120 x plus 1/4 equals 0. There is an equal sign there, so that means I can multiply this whole thing by the least common denominator, which in this case is 20. So this times this is 20 over 5 x squared plus 20 over 20x plus 20 over 4 equals 0. 20 over 5 is 4. 20 over 20 is 1. 20 over 4 is 5 equals 0. The fractions disappeared. Use the quadratic formula and go ahead and solve it. Okay, so that's pretty much it for 9.5. But before I go ahead and close out 9.5, I just want to tell you we are going to skip 9.6 graphing parabolas. It's the last lesson. It is important, but you're going to get it again when you take intermediate algebra. And in fact, I'll introduce it to you as if you've never had it before, so you're not going to be behind. But I just want you to have a little bit more time to study for the final. So go ahead and throw out 9.6. And we'll just stop at 9.5 and we're good to go.